Hi, and welcome to Book Chat with Julie. I'm Julie with the North Little Rock Public Library System, and welcome to my dining room table. Happy October! So, we're going to go a whole nother route, because you know that I like a good theme, I like a good genre, and I like to try new things. So, this is a brand new genre for me, and this is fantasy. So we're going to take a dive and look at some fantasy reads. Back in the summer, late spring, early summer, I was watching other book chatters that do TikTok and Instagram and Facebook and YouTube, and I kept seeing the hype for a book. And I'm thinking, okay, I'm not one to pass down a hype. I can hop on that hype bandwagon. So I knew our library didn't have the book yet because that's how new it was. And I went to Barnes & Noble and they said, well, we only got 4 copies. And I'm like, what? That's crazy. So what is causing the hype is because readers like myself, meaning a little bit older readers, are hopping on the hype bandwagon for this book. So I put myself on hold for 2 copies at Barnes & Noble. I was on a 2-month wait list. I was on almost a 3-month wait list through Amazon for 2 copies. And I was on a 2-month wait list for 2 copies at Books A Million. And I was just going to see which one I got first. Well, kind of luckily, they all actually came in at the same time. So the different people that I wanted to read this book, everybody has their own copy now. But that is Rebecca Yarros, The Fourth Wing. And I'm sure if you're a book follower and you've been watching other people that haul books or chats and things like that, you've probably seen reviews. There's good reviews and there's bad reviews. Some loved it, some hated it. I liked it. It is slated as a YA book. It reads like a YA book. The narrator on the audio is definitely a YA voice. It reads very much like the Divergent series, the Hunger Games series, kind of that dystopian, kind of a different world type story. So basically, you're either going to fly or die, is what it says on there, Fourth Wing. You have Violet. She's the main character, and it's time for her to go to college. Now, the kingdoms and the colonies, they've been at war for about 400 years. And so, but it's time for her to go to college, and her goal is to go the scholarly route. She is a scholar. She's smart. That's where she wants to hone in on her skills. There's 4 or 5 different factions, if you will, of when you go to college, of how you're going to be able to serve your kingdom and your colony through this war. But her mother says no. And she signs her up, and she has to go and become a rider. And she's going to learn to ride dragons. That's not what she wants to do. However, she's very good at it. She has a very natural talent at it, which quickly puts a target on her back. She becomes a threat to the other cadets. And then there's Xaden. And Xaden is a little bit more mature. He is an excellent dragon rider, but she becomes an enemy because she can ride better than him, basically. So they are enemies, and then they are going to become friends, and then they're going to become lovers. So where this is slated as a YA book, there is some mature romantic love scenes in it. That is your choice. That is your choosing, however you want to view that. Because, it was fine. But so October 1st comes around within their school, and they have what's called a threshing, and that is when the dragons choose their riders. And once you're bonded with the dragon, you and that dragon, you have your own conversation. The dragon doesn't talk to anybody else. You kind of have your own language with the dragon, and the dragon is yours for life. So that is Fourth Wing by Rebecca Yarros. And it is on Hoopla. It's on Libby, not Hoopla, but it is on Libby. Both the audio and the ebook is on Libby. If you want to give that a try, and I'm sure the library will have it very quickly as well. So within the genre of the fantasy world, I had some time this fall that I was able to be off and to have some time to read. So I kind of did a little research to see, do I want to dive into this dragon world a little bit more? So researching it out a little bit, you have what's called romantasy. Romantasy part of the fantasy genre is going to focus a little more heavily on the fantasy side. That's kind of where this one comes in. Then you have romantic fantasy. That's going to dive a little more into the romantic side of the romantic fantasy. Then you have fantasy romantic, fantasy fiction, romantic fiction, and you put those two together. And that's going to be very much a balance. So the story is going to be very balanced between the romance side and the fantasy side, and you're not going to lean heavier towards one or the other. So I chose Nora Roberts, the Dragonheart Legacy series. It's a trilogy. The first one is Awakening. The second one is The Becoming. And then the third one is The Choice. This is, it's not necessarily an older trilogy. It began it came out in December of 2020. And this one came out just this past winter of 2023. So it's not an older series by any means. And I don't know if you know that Nora Roberts, she's written over 250 books, and she also writes under the name of J.D. Robb. Maybe you didn't know that either. So her books combined, she's well over 300 books, and she's been around a while. So I decided to try her dragon series. I wasn't sure if I was really going to like it, since fantasy is not a genre that I typically gravitate towards. But I did. So it starts out with Breen. She is teaching school. She has her master's. That is not what she wants to do. She's lived with her mother as a single mother. And her mother has kind of made her live poor, kind of like a pauper even. She has a huge amount of school debt. She's worked 3 or 4 jobs at one time just to help pay the bills so that she could get her master's and become a teacher, because that's what her mother said to do. And she is over at her mother's house, watering the plants, feeding the cats while her mom's out of town, and there's a big wind current. Kind of getting into the fantasy thing. There's a big wind current, and all of a sudden this paper lands in her presence, and it's a paper that basically shows that Breen has $4 million. And she does a little research. She confronts her mom. She finds out it was from her dad. Now, she knew her dad ages, from birth to about 3 years old, but then she never saw her dad again. She never heard from her dad. She just assumed he was out of the picture, when in fact he had been sending this money all along. And so now, as anybody would, if you had an unseen, amount of money, it can change your life forever. And so she goes to Ireland. She meets a grandmother that she had never met before, and she's trying to trace her roots, and she's trying to find her dad. Her dad is deceased. She finds that out early in the book. I'm not giving away any secrets. But her grandmother takes her through a portal. Now we're going into fantasy. And the first thing that happens is they're talking, and she has her hand out, and this little baby dragon lands on her hand. And that kind of caught me, because I was like, oh, who wouldn't want like a little baby dragon to land on your hand? So there the grandmother starts explaining that side of the portal, how her father and her mother met, family history. There's a grandfather that is kind of a mean old guy, and she doesn't really, at least in the first book and half of the second book, she doesn't have a lot of contact with the grandfather at that point. So anyway, she goes back through the portal, confronts her mom again. She leaves, and now she's going back, and she's going to go live beyond the portal in the fantasy world and find out who she really is. And that's the whole trilogy that I hope you give a try. And, I have that little sign that says, I read because roasting people would be wrong. And that's kind of what, dragons do. And I think that's why we read, is to escape people or things or situations, and we can dive into this fantasy. So I hope that you have had a good October. We're in the middle of it. Hopefully we have some cooler temperatures and getting ready for true fall. So dive into some fantasy, whether it's dragons or pixies or fairies or just something to help you escape for a little bit if you like to just sit and read and escape for a while. So I thank you again for joining me from the North Little Rock Public Library System for another episode of Book Chat with Julie.